Focus is back on the Providence mayoral race tonight.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Best dressed guy in the house is Kobi Dennis today. I'll tell you, woo, that's sharp. I don't know if he had a previous engagement or he puffed up for us, but we should. This is good. Wait till you see this one. Very nice. Welcome aboard. Nice to have you on this Tuesday evening. Kobi Dennis is a candidate for mayor. Actually, the first guy to announce his opposition to. Or his, challenge to Mayor Elorza. The race may be feeling out a little bit. Mr. DeRobio was here a couple of weeks ago, the former longtime educator in Providence. But I say Kobi's been quiet. He says, heck no, I've been out there working the streets, so we'll find out how that's going. Let's check in on a couple of the issues of the evening. This is another one of those. Another one bites the dust types. The New York State Attorney General hits the skids in a big way here. Here's the latest from CBS.
Eric Schneiderman announced his resignation hours after a blockbuster article in The New Yorker outlined allegations from 4 women he dated who claimed the New York Attorney General was physically and emotionally abusive. One accuser, Michelle Manning Barish, told the magazine, "One time he just slapped me open-handed and with great force across the face. He then used his body weight to hold me down and he began to choke me."
I thought it was a very powerful and damning set of facts.
Another woman, Tanya Silveritnum, claims Schneiderman would slap her, choke her, and spit at her.
These stories are tragic, horrific, and we see the hypocrisy involved.
The 63-year-old Democrat has been a champion of the Me Too movement and filed a civil rights lawsuit against Harvey Weinstein and his company after the Hollywood mogul was accused of sexual misconduct.
We've begun a long overdue reckoning with our culture of violence and silence.
In a statement, Schneiderman denied any wrongdoing, but he says he is stepping down because the allegations will prevent him from doing his job.
Schneiderman also stated, "In the privacy of intimate relationships, I have engaged in role-playing and other consensual sexual activity. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office has launched an investigation."
Role-playing? What? Joe Frazier? Anyway, what people do in their personal lives is their business, but this one bleeds over, and I'm sorry, a quick trigger of a response within 3 hours, a resignation in 3 hours. I mean, surely he has something that he can't defend. But what's interesting about this, again, I think it's fair to contrast that there are others in high-profile positions who are accused of some of the same stuff, and it just seems to fly off them. One might be the President of the United States of America. Now, I am not a dummy. I understand it's a little bit more difficult to unseat the President of the United States for what has been reported to have happened before an election. But it's almost as if the Democrats, raced to this conclusion with this guy simply to be able to say, hey, our closet is with no skeletons. So it is a strange thing in this country today that this is the kind of behavior that actually ends up being part of the consideration about someone's high-profile public service. Anyway, speaking of high-profile public service, the First Lady yesterday announces her Be Best campaign, and I got to tell you, I understand it's it's a 3-pronged effort for kids, and we all want to see our kids healthier. And the opioid crisis has bled into children now who are born with challenges, and I think we've completely underestimated the opioid crisis in this country, and we've done many programs about that here. And bullying in the schools is something that's absolutely unacceptable, and we got to do a lot of things about that. But she's got to be kidding you and me over the idea that she's going to step up on cyberbullying. How about 2 out of 3, Melania? Anyway, this was the First Lady yesterday.
There is one goal to be best, and that is to educate children about the many issues they are facing today. If we truly listen to what our kids have to say, whether it be their concerns or ideas, adults can provide them the support and tools they need to grow up to be happy and productive adults.
You know, because she's mixed the cyberbullying thing in with the rest of the package, I'm just aghast at the lack of courage on pundits across this country who don't look this story square in the eye and say, what a joke. What a joke. The President of the United States is one of the worst Twitter offenders we have in this country. And even over the last 24-hour news cycle was tweeting out things that are absolutely unacceptable for a 7-year-old to do. And so why is it that this is something that we're able to separate? And if you can throw me that banana about the idea is, well, the spouse shouldn't be responsible. Oh, please. This is an administration like this. First ladies and presidents are an administration, right? And she doesn't get a pass. She's got to be accountable for his behavior just like he needs to be accountable for his behavior. The double standards, and by the way, for those of you who are big feminists out there, you think this is supporting feminism? The idea that she can't be evaluated properly for her association with the president and his behavior on Twitter? Because she's what? The first lady that needs to be coddled? I just think we need to do a little bit more thinking in this country about that story. Anyway, let's come home. Mayor Lorza's got a little bit of a thing to dodge this week. Tim White's, you know, like a dog seeing blood, puts his teeth in your neck and just bites down. This is an essay on Target 12 worth looking at about a lengthy travel schedule on the part of the mayor.
The mayor is actually out of town right now. He had a conference down in Austin, Texas.
Eventually
I was here.
that. You were not here. You got here that night.
No, I got here at 4:30. That's not nighttime.
There was a press
conference. I got here in the middle of the storm.
Does that resonate? Is that a problem?
That's a problem. That's a problem that he thinks he was here. He continues to think he's here, Dan. Where is he? Is what people keep asking me at the table.
No, really? Is that up there? Is it out there on the street?
Big time. I mean, before, not just the storms. I didn't realize it was 59. I was actually debating with the 59 trips. I was debating with a constituent recently. I said, no, I think it's about 34 before the report came.
Are you telling me that on the ground people wonder where the mayor is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe because they're sitting with, you know, someone that's running for mayor, but when I'm talking to them, they're actually like, where's he been? Is he involved? Is he still here?
By the way, puffed up good today. Appreciate that.
Just for you?
Dwarfing me. Dwarfing me. It's a casual show, you know. Kobi Dennis, ladies and gentlemen, first announced for mayor, what, months ago now?
Oh, months ago, yeah, October. Yeah.
And you were here the week that you did on Facebook. You know, you and I had a pretty honest conversation back then about what you needed to do to get yourself out there. Are you doing it? Because I don't see you very high profile carrying the day, at least in the space of local mainstream media. You know, you're not on the air yet.
Right.
So what's going on? Are you in first, second, third, fourth gear? What are you in?
I'm definitely, you know, ramping it up right now. I'm ramping it up. The first 3 to 4 months, I will say, I was underground. I'm trying to get the base ready. Trying to, you know, my target population is 18 to 25. Trying to get them.
They don't vote.
That's the challenge that I've had. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to change the entire culture. Then with this election, it's not just about me. This is about trying to get people back involved in politics.
You know, if you're doing any political consultancy, and I, you know, offer a lot of unsolicited advice around here, I think it's a really interesting question whether you can change a culture while you're running for office or ride a culture change running for office. If you're trying to force a habit change out there, some people would say as a candidate you're kind of dead man walking. Trying to get the young people to engage in a mayor's race doesn't generally happen.
Right, and you know, a lot of the things I've done that you know don't generally happen. You know, running programs without any money. You know, trying to.
Oh, you're on the ground work. You should look Kobi up. I mean, the on the ground work you've done in the community is fantastic. No question about it. But is that really the core strategy to get the young people out? Because is the rest of the constituency already earmarked for the incumbent, or what do you mean?
Oh no, I don't think they're earmarked for the incumbent at all. I just think they're already, you know, they know who they at this point who they're going to vote for. It's my job in the coming months to get them to change that decision. And actually, the incumbent's doing a good job at helping me with that, with all this, you know. So I just sit back now in my chair and read the news stories.
Why? What else has he done other than getting caught? I mean, it's not like it's a taxpayer scandal. Right. He says a lot of the funding for these trips has been private and grant money. And so it's not like he's got his hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah. The trips, I'll be honest. I mean, it seems a little bit excessive, but taking those trips, if they're going to benefit the people of Providence, I'm okay with that. But I just like to see what benefits. I'd like to, use some of the technology he's talking about in innovation and show us when you're in China. Show us what you're doing in Guatemala, that you're not at, Auntie, his Tia's house or something. I want to see that he's doing something for the city of Providence.
Some reciprocal relationship with Guatemala City for products.
That's a little questionable. Like I said, I'm not accusing him of anything. I'd love him to just show us that. And with all this, we're supposed to be this innovative, city. Let's see some of that.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about Kobi's platform and things you ought to be thinking about that way. Stay with us. So it's a 1, 2, 3, 4-step plan. It's not for your lawn. It's not the 4-step program for your lawn, but it is a 4-step program for vision for the city of Providence that Kobi has recently put out. Safer neighborhoods, collective governance, a reinvigorated city, healthy, equitable, and sustainable communities. Safer neighborhoods, how?
Boy, safer neighborhoods definitely has a lot to do with conjoining with the anchor institutes like Brown and the hospitals and so on and so forth that have their police. They have their own police forces and security. I would like to extend them out into the communities that they're in. I mean, we provide services for them. Extended services, they should provide extended services for us.
You want them to work past the campus?
Absolutely. Absolutely, especially Brown. It's great.
Well, Brown's integrated into the community or the neighborhood.
A little bit more they could be, for sure, Dan.
No, I'm talking about geographically, just about, right?
Oh, Johnson and Wales as well.
Can a Brown police officer enforce the law in the city streets?
Outside of Brown at this point, I couldn't tell you that, but that's what I'm proposing. And if it's
But we have city streets inside the campus.
Right.
So how does that work?
I don't know. I'd like to sit down with them and see how we can get them to move over laterally a couple of streets or come off the campus here and there, because they can't tell me they're always busy. It's a college campus. The kids are in class and so on and so forth. They could patrol the surrounding areas and help us out.
What does collective governance mean?
Getting together as far as with the state. The state, doing a lot of collaborations with the state and other municipalities. We definitely have to get together with them. Instead of traveling out of the country, why wouldn't we get with, our state leaders and get with Central Falls, and let's talk about Situate, where we would get with Situate.
Mayor, by the way, is not popular amongst fellow mayors in this city right now.
Oh,
he's aloof. He's not incredibly well integrated or networked, and his decision to support Aaron Regenberg in the lieutenant governor's race upset a whole tier of mayors, FYI.
Oh.
Are you aware of that?
No, I was aware of the decision. I didn't know it upset.
No, it's got the whole mayoral team, because they're all the key people, because they're all in the same mayoral club, you know. So FYI on that, just in case you want to know.
A lot of clubs that I'm definitely not privy to.
Well, the politics and the schematic of the politics is sometimes interesting. A reinvigorated city means what? What are these?
That's
concepts?
Right. And that's when you're throwing those terms out, and that's what I've been doing in the community day to day, trying to connect these terms to the real people, to the people on the ground. So reinvigorated, just starting over. Stop double dipping. Stop shorting the pension fund. Stop not letting us see what's happening with the money and
we have a transparency problem in the city?
Big time. We have a big time transparency problem.
What's the example of that?
Like I would say the budget, for sure. They're forever never saying there's a pitfall in the budget, and we all know better than that. As far as his plans to do certain things.
He's running short-term, at least short-term surpluses, right? Every year you're saying that everything balances out.
Everything balances out, or they're in the black, and that's totally untrue. I mean, I got into a couple of debates.
Untrue because?
Because we are still $1 billion in debt.
Because of pension and OPEB and, that's the healthcare portion of the pension. Yep. That's the big weight on the city, correct?
Right.
He would say, other than that, everything is kind of, balancing, but that lingers as the big problem.
Right, and if he would say, I think that would be okay. I just don't like to mislead the people. I'm not saying everything's going to be perfect under my administration.
Do you want to sell the water supply?
Absolutely not.
You don't?
No.
Why?
For a few reasons. The town of Situate, I think it's 42% of the land, I think, Providence Water Supply owns, and that's also 21% of their, annual budget. What are those people going to do? I think about that. Just like Cranston when we did the one-ways with the park, with Roger Williams Park. Did we sit down with Cranston? I bet you Alan Fung would say we didn't. And people at Cranston are still upset about that. We need to sit down with the surrounding cities. This is that, community. This is that, community governance. This is what we have to do. And what stops someone else from selling that? If they sell the water company once, if we sell it and privatize it, what's going to happen to somebody else for selling it to the highest bidder again? So I'm not in favor of that.
Are you worried about, like, I'm a little concerned that it's at least the last financial backstop asset that the city has. Right. You get rid of that. I know he wants to pay down the pension debt with that.
I understand where he's trying to go with that.
But it leaves you without a backstop.
Right.
Is that one of your concerns?
That's one of my concerns for sure. And the fact that I watched Flint Town, and I actually have a lot of friends on my campaign that are that have been to Flint, Michigan, and helped with the water crisis, and seen those people eye to eye, and realize that they still don't have all clean water, and it's not a good sight. I don't think people understand how important water is to us every day.
Healthy, equitable, and sustainable communities. What does that mean?
Oh, definitely. So healthy communities. Everything that I do is going to be health and wealth. All the initiatives I have to do with will have a lot to do with health in the individual. Wealthy, we definitely need more programs to try to sustain in the budget. We need more initiatives. And have I come up with all of those just yet, Dan? Absolutely not.
What is it? For the person on the couch trying to figure out what that means, it sounds like jargon. We need more initiatives. What are you talking about?
Well, these ideas. This is the same thing that the incumbent is talking about. Sometimes I agree with him when it comes to traveling to find out what's going on, but I don't need to travel to do it. So this is what I'm saying. We need to build our, use our resources that we have here. We have a lot of smart people here, Dan, including yourself. A lot of smart people here to come up with new initiatives and new ideas to try to build revenue. We can't keep on going elsewhere or keep on taking from other line items to try to, rebuild something that's been broken for many years. The last few administrators, and once again, I don't want to see that I'm on his side, but it wasn't just the mayor, the current mayor, that faulted our current budget. It's been, the last two, maybe even three.
All right, we're talking about the education piece when we come back. Stay with us.
I don't expect anything at this point.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. But, the days of giving away more than the city can afford, those days are done. We don't do that anymore.
I'm not sure what the conversation is between the mayor and the teachers union, the president, Mary Beth Calabro there. What's your perspective on what's happening with the school system, education, the capital improvements necessary? Seems to be a lot of blah, 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 blah. I mean, reportedly, the mayor hasn't really had an earnest negotiation with the teachers union in 9 months.
Oh, that's the part that kind of disturbs me, Dan. The fact that he hasn't sat down. The teachers are very instrumental in Providence moving forward, and they deserve a sit down, and they deserve an explanation, especially after the last recap, what they just showed. We're done with the days of giving people what they don't deserve.
Would you be urgent to get a collective bargaining agreement with them? You said that the way the city of Providence works, unlike a lot of your communities if you don't live in the city, is that the school board is appointed primarily by the mayoralty, so the mayor has a much stronger hand. Clearly the superintendent is the operational leader, but the school board, for the most, the school committee is more or less. Well, you tell me. You think it's taking its P's and Q's direct from City Hall?
Absolutely. That's part of the problem. And the school council is all appointed by him, so is the superintendent as well. So whatever is coming from them is coming from the top.
Well, if you've got a really earnest education mayor, that could be a wonderful thing, because I'm not so heck-bent, to be honest with you, on the incompetency of school committees across this state. It seems like any schlub can become a school committee member. What's the solution to improving? I mean, this is every city in America's got this challenge. Right. The buildings are rotting to a core. What's your plan?
Sure, that plan that's definitely in place. My plan, first of all, with the teachers, Dan, is to sit down with them and find out what we can do. It's a give and take situation for sure. it's definitely a give and take. And right now, I just think the city of Providence is doing more taking than giving. And then in the same token, to say that himself and the chief of police are going to get a raise, you know, to say that the teachers don't deserve a raise, that's not.
So we have a headline for the chief of police. There's a proposal for the chief to go from $140 and change to $175,000. Listen, I don't know anybody that's going to criticize the overall performance of Chief Clements. Do you?
No, I like Chief Clements and I like the job he's doing, but could there be? I just don't know where they're getting this performance-based, you know, increases from. You know, what is it based on?
He would be at the top of the scale.
Right.
You know, there. Seems to me he's earned it. You think that's symbolic against the teachers? Don't we run into a jam when we don't look at these things each for their own net worth?
Well, that's what I mean. I think the teachers, if we went on bare facts of who's proven themselves, I think they would both be in the same, you know, the same boat. Chief Clements is a great guy, but crime in Providence, you know, once again they say it's down. I disagree. And once again with the teachers,
you disagree with the data?
With the data that they're putting out, because I don't think everything is reported properly. They definitely.
So what are you going to do about that?
Well, we have to have different reporting systems. When's the last time we did a survey about the police? When we talked to the people about the performance of the police?
You think there's still
where are we getting this
We've
from?
had a history of relationship problems, but it seems that has quelled significantly. You still think there's a relationship problem with the police department in the city with the people?
Well, not as much as before, thanks to me, because I'm one of the ones that built that relationship.
Right, you've done a lot of work that way.
Right, but I just would still like to see on what grounds are these raises, you know, and I think the people deserve to see, because if they do, like I know Chief Clements, so I'd be okay with that. But do the people know what he's done lately to see that he deserves such an increase?
Did the story a little bit better. We only got a minute or so. What's your financial situation? We had headlines here about Mayor Elorza leading the league in a substantial way with hundreds of thousands of dollars in his campaign account. Are you out there fundraising, or are you just guerrilla marketing this whole thing?
Pretty much out there. I wouldn't say fundraising directly. I'm out there talking. The people that I'm targeting are struggling to get by right now. So fundraising to me is having them come into an event, paying $25 or $50 to hear the platform.
Have you raised any significant money?
I wouldn't. What's significant to me, because our community is failing.
How much you raised?
Probably about 30 grand total. Yeah, I know. That's significant in my neighborhood. I understand that. It's citywide. But I'm not going to turn this into a financial battle, because if I did that, like myself and many others, no one would step up. If it was about money, then I don't know too many candidates that could go head-to-head with him, or even in the gubernatorial race. But it's not about money.
Still hand-to-hand combat out there.
Absolutely. Every day.
Well, you get the best rest.
I appreciate it.
It's good to see you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for
Kobi
having me.
Dennis, running for mayor. Pay attention. He's got a lot of good ideas. Final word and we come back. Stay with us. So, the CBS Charity Classic is on the agenda for the 24th and 25th of June. Today, Brad Faxon and Billy Andrade down at the Save the Bay offices on the water announced the new field, which includes Rory McIlroy. So that will change a lot about, let's put it this way, that will be an injection of adrenaline into what has been already 20 years worth of success for the CVS Charity Classic, raising over $20 million for the community. But between Montgomery on the champion side and Lexi on the LPGA side and Rory on the PGA side, it's going to be a great party of golf in June, so good for them. All right, we'll see you tomorrow night, and don't forget, 3 o'clock on the radio on WPRO tomorrow afternoon. Thanks for watching. Good night.